And now, marine weather around Alaska.
All right, looking at today's sea ice analysis. Of course, the sea ice well past St. Lawrence Island now. Also, Nunivak Island, and next stop there, St. Matthew Island, looks like it's about to close in there. And this will continue to advance slowly southwest and to the south on into Bristol Bay for the next couple of days. Otherwise, out here over the Bering Sea for tonight, just couple of low centers there. Wind's not all that strong, but a widespread area of light snow and snow showers covering the area. This low tracking northeastward, spreading some snow into southwest Kodiak Island later tonight and up across Bristol Bay. High pressure, cold temperatures over the northwest and western interior down into south central Alaska, where clearing skies will allow temperatures to fall below zero here. Susitna, Manuska Valley into the Kenai Peninsula. And areas of snow, Copper River Basin, northwestward there to the Arctic coast, and it stays wet and breezy over the Panhandle. That'll improve tomorrow there, but still a lot of shower activity, especially central northern areas. High pressure, cold temperatures, central interior, snow showers here in the southwest part of the state, and snow and clouds spreading into southern Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula throughout the day. Snow continues for the Arctic coast, and then for Wednesday, got the next system pushing gale force winds and snow into the western Aleutians. Looking at the coastal water forecast here for the south coast of the Panhandle, west winds 30 to 35 knots, west winds 40 knots tomorrow with seas around 20 feet, and west to northwesterlies 30 to 35 knots on the north coast. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, south winds 25 knots, seas 5 feet, southeast at 15 for Stevens Passage. Southwest winds 20 knots with 12-foot seas for Clarence Strait. And for Wednesday, northeast winds now, 25 knots there for the south coast and the central coast north at 20 knots. And the north coast, north to northeast winds 15 to 20 knots. Lynn Canal, north winds 25 gusting 40 knots. Stevens Passage, northeast winds 25 gusting 40 knots. And Clarence Strait, southeast winds at 20 knots with those seas down to 4 feet. Prince William Sound, west winds 25 knots tomorrow. North Gulf Coast, same forecast, west winds 25 knots. South at 25 for the Barren Islands and Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay. Gale warnings, actually for southern Cook Inlet here, gale warnings. Northeast winds 35 knots, blowing right in toward Augustine Island. North of the Forelands, northeast winds 20 knots. And for Wednesday, Cook Inlet, north winds 20 to 30 knots, strongest south of the Forelands, northeast 30 for Kamishak Bay. South winds 25 knots here with that low center expected to track somewhere between Kamishak Bay here, southern Cook Inlet, and the Barren Islands. So south winds 25 knots there. North Gulf Coast variable to mainly north winds at 15 to 20 knots. Prince William Sound, north winds at 10 knots. Kodiak Island, east winds 20 knots for Shelikof Strait, otherwise on the east side of the island here, southwest at 30 knots. And the Alaska Peninsula, southwest winds 25 to 30 knots. And for Bristol Bay, northeast winds 20 knots. South winds 20 knots for Bristol Bay on Wednesday. The Alaska Peninsula here, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots. And for Kodiak Island, southwest 25 knots. On the east side of the island, Shelikof Strait, northeast at 15. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, west to southwest winds at 30 knots with 8 to 11 foot seas. Adak and Atka, west winds 30 knots, seas 10 to 11 feet. And west to northwest winds 25 to 30 knots for the western Aleutians. And then moving on to Wednesday, the next front coming in, gale warnings here for the western Aleutians, south to southeast winds 40 to 45 knots, southwest at 20 knots for Adak and Atka. And then westerly winds 15 to 20 knots for the eastern Aleutians. Southwest coast, we've got brisk wind advisories for east winds 25 to 30 knots. For the St. Lawrence Island area and Norton Sound, both looking at brisk wind advisories as well. East winds 25 knots there. North 25 for St. Matthew Island with 8-foot seas, and gale warnings for west winds at 35 knots for the Pribilof Islands. Those fall back to 20 knots, still out of the west there for St. Paul and St. George on Wednesday. St. Matthew Island, northwest at 20 knots. Southwest coast, St. Lawrence Island, south winds 20 knots, but east winds at 30 knots for Norton Sound. Eastern Woodward Sea Coast tomorrow, west winds 20 knots, much lighter northerly winds at 10 knots for the central coast. west at 15 for the western Arctic coast and for the Chukchi Sea. Kind of a variable to east wind pattern there at 10 to 15 knots. And for Wednesday, Chukchi Sea, east to northeast winds, 10 to 25 knots. And for the much of the Arctic coast, looking at southwest winds at 20 knots, more of a westerly direction from Kaktovik to Demarcation Point.